Welcome to Gray Areas for December 17th, 2024, episode 652. We are right in the middle of our Best Characters Ever month, doing some pre-recorded episodes for the holidays so we don't miss any time, but can step away for a couple weeks to, do family stuff and whatnot. Last time, if you didn't see or hear last week's episode, we started our top 25 male video game characters list, so you really should go watch that first. It's going to be weird otherwise. This week, we dive into the top 10. Only 10 names to talk about, but they're big ones. We're going to have more to say. At the end, we'll also do some comparing to the list from 10 years ago and talk about how much things have changed, how this list turned out, all that jazz. Hello to our panel. It's not Dave, but Maisie and Michaela are here.
I can't help but notice Dave still could not find a way to join.
And he didn't even watch ASU. What the hell, man?
I can't help but notice.
Such a shame.
It's all right. You know what? We're going to do a better job without him.
Oh, yeah.
Without his stupid votes and commentary.
We can talk shit about his picks.
Meaningless insights. Oh, don't worry. I'm way ahead of you on that one.
Unless there are picks, then we won't talk shit.
Yeah,
That's
well, even a clock is right twice a day. Broken clock, whatever.
Yeah, just a clock in
So that's a
general.
clock,
is
it's wrong. Yeah.
Even a broken clock finds nuts.
Exactly.
We have not yet gotten to anybody's number one on our panel.
'Cause our
So,
panel rocks.
I forgot what my number one was.
all of them are in the
Okay.
top 10 somewhere. It's not a spoiler because you already know it would have had enough points to clear our number 25, which was Atreus. So they're here somewhere. Where? I don't know. But we're going to start our top 10 with a couple characters in a similar boat. Top 5 performers from last time who have taken a slight step back.
Okay.
Like our number 10, Phoenix Wright.
Blah, blah, blah.
And let's be honest, Chris. I know you're with me on this one. He was way too high last time.
Yes.
So being number 10, like the top 10, a lot of people would argue that's still way too high. I don't, because I love him. And I think the extra games that we've had of him, getting to see Old Man Phoenix in 5 and 6, although he takes a sidestep to allow for Apollo to really flourish. Just a great character. I love what he represents. His conviction, his willingness to always seek out the truth, believe in his clients, even though in real life you probably shouldn't. But I like to think he has like an extra sensory awareness of who's innocent, right? But then just like the battles you have with him, it's all like logic based. It's the intelligence. It's what he figures out and stumbles upon throughout these cases. He's just like incredible, and there's no one else like him in gaming, which I think I really love too.
Is he a defense attorney?
Yes, of course.
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess prosecutors are bad,
Yeah.
right?
Well, in this game, yes.
Most of them.
Rude. That's really cute.
In this game, they're your mortal enemy.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Number 2 is too high, as you mentioned. I don't have any qualms number 10 either. I had him 3rd, I think. So I hadn't really budged on it much. I was hoping he'd end up around this range. I'm going to vote for characters where I think they should be, but sometimes my vote, I don't want to reflect the group. I don't want to have too much influence. There's another example of this coming up. In the case of Phoenix in particular, it's interesting. We talked in the last part about how, if you're in your 40s, you're ancient. Well, he's in his 40s now.
Yeah.
We've seen him come along the journey for this long. He doesn't really look any different. He basically looks the same, which is kind of weird because most people start to change as they get 10, 20 years older. But everything he's done in that time is what matters. He's an adoptive father now to multiple kids in a way, kind of. One more directly than another. But, he is the consistent through line. Not just being there and being present, but, the morality of the entire series is based on primarily him. Yes, some others, sure. But without him being such a rock and having a sense of humor and, all these other things, the whole series falls apart. And that includes Apollo's games. Apollo got some votes again this time, as he did last time. More than last time, because I think we like him more following that next trilogy than we did back then. As much as I like Apollo, it's still not the same. And he needs Phoenix to bounce off of to be complete himself, which is a testament to Phoenix and how high he should be.
Yeah. Yeah, he's great. And the way he rolls with the punches of, the games are pretty grounded. I don't mean with legal system wise, but just in terms of magic and whatever, except for one huge caveat.
Sure.
And I don't know why they're yes, it's everything normal except talking to dead people.
Yep.
That's legit. That's a real thing. You're okay, but they're pretty consistent in those games at least. He just figures shit out, and it's really incredible. I would not have had him as high on my list wherever he ended up. I think it was it was top 10 definitely.
Fifth, I think.
Yeah, I was actually gonna guess fifth.
Yeah, fifth.
Sounded pretty right. His presence in the beginning of Apollo Justice's game, actually, where he's just this like fucking puppet master, and he's already figured everything out, and he has a beanie. It's so cool.
And what a stark contrast to when we go back to 3, which is funny because chronologically this is before he starts his career, but game-wise it's like almost end of 3, start of 4. End of 3, we see him at his like fresh facest, and he's getting manipulated by Dahlia, and he has no idea what's going on around him, and he's a quivering mess anytime something comes up. And then he bounces back from that and hypothermia, closes out 3, and starts 4 by being the sagacious old man.
Yeah.
So what a journey we go through even in just that short span, let alone the whole series.
I actually saw art where it's like darkly lit and he's in the beanie and he's smiling.
I saw that too.
On his fingers,
And he's
like puppet strings with like little Apollo and the bad prosecutor and everybody because of just what he plays the piano now, I guess, also in 4.
Sure.
But just like that case, it's my favorite case in the entire series. And it just like kind of shows his growth. Like, because we've seen, we were at his first case. And Chris, you mentioned, like, even before that, we've seen him. And just this evolution, he eventually becomes this legendary lawyer, even in the game's canon. It's just great. I just love him so much.
He's so good. And I love that we get to, like, play alongside him. We really get to see the ups and downs as he's trying to figure out this case. Like, all the cases, we're right there with him at every step. So when like we're feeling that relief and joy when he does put things together, like we're just right there with him too. And that's a really cool like connection with the player that I don't know if a lot of games can really achieve that same connection. And it's so cool.
The coolest I've ever felt playing a video game was probably Persona 5. In a few different moments. Just everything looks suave, and the menus and all the stuff we've talked about to death with P5. Before P5, it was this series.
Yeah.
When you do manage to figure out what connection there is and what weird piece of evidence you have to present, and then the game picks up with the music, and there's extreme pointing and yelling and all these things that swell up and make you feel like you've done a thing. I mean, yes, Phoenix is the embodiment of that. Maybe that's not fair. But he also cross-examined a whale, so fuck it.
Yeah. And like being put in the corner, you have games where like, we got to make this in a first-person shooter. We got to make this run. We got to make it to the building. And there's all these. It's like, that's fine. But like knowing that if you say something wrong, the judge is going to just dismiss your case is the most like tense that I felt. So he's great. He is the conduit to allow for all these experiences. And I think that's really special.
The series probably does it like 8 times over 7 games. I'm counting the most recent compilation, not Edgeworth. Where it's like, this is the full penalty. This is not like you lose a star or a badge or whatever the metric is. Like you can see the judge is like, you're gonna lose this whole bar, and you're like, oh fuck! Like it just little stuff like that. It's a bar. It doesn't matter, but it does, and that's what really makes the series click.
Yep.
These are probably the games that make me the saddest that I, despite my career and what I do for a living, cannot hack. I'm not good at puzzles. I'm not good at investigating. And but the characters and everything that you're actually doing is so exciting. And like the swelling in the courtroom when you're figuring shit out is so fucking cool. And like, I was able to do one case, which was so much fun. And then I couldn't do anything else because I suck.
I think you should consider playing with a guide.
Yeah.
I don't think having a walkthrough of like what evidence to present when really detracts that much from the game if you really like the courtroom experience, which obviously you do.
Yeah.
I think that would be a fine way to do it if you're like, well, I don't want to have to worry about like, did I check every single scene for every piece of evidence I need?
Well,
That's
and nowadays,
where it's hard, yeah.
I don't know if the new, and we're going on an aside, but if it gets you to play the game, it's worth it to me. The Great Ace Attorney Chronicles actually have like a story mode, which just like guides you in game on what to do next.
Yeah.
And if the new remakes have adopted that, that's the way to go.
Okay.
You get a little bit stuck, you hit the start, and it kind of like does it for you. So
love it. Yay.
And you get to experience the great story and the great characters.
Right, exactly. Because I watched I think I either watched you play it or maybe this was the case that I did where Apollo where Phoenix defended himself, and I think that's when he wore the beanie and all of that stuff. That was so cool, and I loved that development and that story, and him really what seemingly was like his back's completely against the wall and him like figuring out how to save himself.
There's
is just
really no
amazing.
shame in a guide. I know all three of us have used them because there comes a point where what the game wants you to do is not what you think makes sense in that moment, or you've presented an evidence one beat too early for
Yeah.
a thing that's
yeah.
not. So like we have all had to go like, okay, what in the world are we going for here? And even when those can be frustrating, it doesn't detract from my love of the series at all.
Cool.
Mm-hmm,
That's great.
absolutely.
Yay.
Number 9 is another top 5 from last time that fell a bit. There's no shame in only being top 10, especially when in a world where there's a lot more quality video game characters. I thought I had the arrow keys set up. It's fine. Zidane
Huh.
went from number 4 to number
Zidane.
9, much like Phoenix went from number 2 to number 10.
Yeah. So Maisie,
He was my number.
go ahead, Kayla.
Sorry, go ahead. No, you should go first.
Well,
No,
I'm
it's your
just saying-
number 1.
I think
He was my number one.
Yeah, it's your number one. You should go first. You go.
Okay. I'm not surprised that he fell a little bit on the overall list. I think that's okay, but I still love this character so much as I did 10 years ago. He's still number one. I think his arc is just so compelling. And when you consider like the original 7, Cloud's kind of like this lone wolf guy, and then it's even worse with Squall, and then you get a refreshing character like Zidane, who is funny. He's kind of goofy, but he also has this very strong conviction to help others always. His quote is, "You don't need a reason to help people," and I try to live by that too. Of like, you should just help people, no matter what. And it's just, he's great. He's my favorite. I love him so much. And the arc he goes through, being an angel of death and trying to deal with that, and then the "you're not alone" moment, which still like makes me cry whenever I play through it. Like, it's just, he's so good. He's still like my favorite Final Fantasy protagonist of all of them. So
See, I just can't get Maisie to stick with it because it's what makes his journey so great. And this is what I always like struggle.
Yeah.
She wants them to be great from the beginning. And I'm like, that is not always what makes the best story. A lot of times it
No.
actually, you need them to be in a bad place and then get to a good place.
Well, and that's what we talked about with Atreus.
Yeah.
too.
So he's at the beginning, he's a little cocky, he's a little bit of an asshole, and that's all intentional because he needs to find out he was created to destroy. It's the Goku thing.
Yeah.
And it's one of the great journeys, and he's so different than all those other Final Fantasy protagonists and kind of protagonists in gaming a lot of the time. Yeah, he's
I
great.
know this, and here we go again. This is another one that I'm like, just get over it. Like, stop. I don't know why. Just hate him. I don't know. But I'm hoping maybe that it's like the combination of hating all the other characters in 9, like the stupid princess and the stupid tiny girl. All of those people I hate.
mean, okay, the tiny girl does kind of suck. Aiko.
she's not great.
She's not great.
Aiko,
But Garnet's
yeah.
great.
I hate Garnet.
Garnet's brilliant.
You're stupid. Yeah,
I
like
do
that.
think-
I think that's the problem.
I think 9 has my biggest gap of cast where I'm like, there's some really good characters and some characters I absolutely can't stand. All JRPG parties have that for me.
Yeah.
There's a few different party members in 9 where I'm like, get the fuck off my screen. There's some other really, really strong ones too.
Yeah.
Garnet's one of the strong ones.
Yeah,
Quina
Garnet's a
is
good
one of the weak ones.
I like Quina. She eats everything.
Yeah, that does speak to Maisie.
Yeah.
We'll see if Quina made the list for the. No, she didn't. She-
Did not.
not.
I asked Sean. I was like, "Can I put Quina on my list?" He's
And I was
like,
like,
"No."
absolutely not. Yeah. Do you have anything to say about Zidane, or is that it?
I
Are we
want to
done?
like him.
Okay, great.
but no.
We went through a stretch of basically 4 straight like edgy protagonists in Final Fantasy, edgy in different ways, that all have to go through a pretty big transformational journey, which is why it's appropriate that our number 8 is Cloud.
Okay. Yeah. Which original? So he was an honorable mention, so he moved up.
So, and
Which
we had
is-
125 people that got ranking votes last time. So he was outside of that.
Yeah.
And now he is
Dang.
number 8.
And that is,
Yeah.
I want to say, exclusive to the remakes.
Yep.
And I think
1000%.
especially Rebirth, to be honest. So is
Yeah.
there a little bit of recency bias? I like kind of for a character who's how many the decades old. He gets a little bit of the vote for being an icon. but his actual character is really great and you get to see more of it in the remake, which is why I'm so glad that they were done. You can have your quibbles with it, but especially getting to see him in Rebirth, which is such a weird game, and there's a lot of weird story beats, but you can see it like kind of a playful side. He actually seems to at different points have fun. He seems to be in on the joke, as opposed to just like completely serious, almost to the point of being a caricature. He's great, and I was very surprised to see that side of him.
I am so like I didn't play 7 until I was a bit older, and my first exposure to Cloud was in Kingdom Hearts, which is just a very big disservice
One
to
of the
him
worst.
because it prevents
One
of the worst. Like, it just presents this very like emo, brooding character, and that's who I thought he was for a long time. And then I went back and played the original 7, and there's like some hints that that's not entirely the case. But in the original 7, there's just not a lot of character development in general. You just can't really do a lot. And so what really changed my mind on him was Remake. He is such a great character. He's kind of a huge dork, and I love it.
Aw.
Like, he's silly. He tries to be cool, but people see through his shit really quickly and call him out on it. And he feels like a fully realized character with Remake, and especially in Rebirth. I love what they're doing with his memories that are kind of messed up. It really plays into that aspect of his character that's kind of like tormented and unsure really early, which I thought was a weakness in the original game. So I love Cloud so much, which is crazy because 10 years ago I would have been like, fuck that guy. So it's just amazing how far we've come because of these remakes that just do so much work for him.
Well, as you said, Kingdom Hearts portrays him as the emo edgelord, which is what they got from the source material. Because both Cloud and Sephiroth are not characters until about halfway through Disc 2. Which is a long time to not be a character. But it takes him basically being in a wheelchair and then dumped into the live stream and then coming to terms with the fact that he's just pretending to be Zack and isn't, where he finally starts to be like, oh, this is Cloud. This is not this like aloof, distant person who's been a mercenary for the better part of this game. There is something there. And luckily, I think they recognized when they were doing Remake and Rebirth, like, we need to lean into that more because it's fine for him to be kind of tough and gruff in the very beginning. It goes on way too long in the original. Yeah. And looking back, Sean mentioned it, like, he would not have been honorable mention this time. He probably would have been, let's say it's just based on the original 7. 50s? Like, a big deal for gaming. Again, you start talking recognizable video game characters, probably like top 15, maybe 10. It's because of the characterization they've done in the remakes that I think he's gone to this whole new level.
Yeah, well, and Chris, you just said it, because now they're able to fuse actual characterization with the really cool stuff of him thinking that he's somebody else the whole time, and even getting to point out to Maisie, like, do you see that character in the background? That's actually Cloud when you're in Nibelheim and all of that. Yeah. So that's all really
so
cool.
Yeah.
But that's a cool concept, and that doesn't make for a great character. Now we're getting that fusion of both, and I'm really excited for the third one because of that.
If anything, it's weird looking back at the first one because it's like, okay, again, like manly man soldier, doesn't talk much, quiet, keeps to himself, whatever, brooding. And we put him in a dress. Haha, we put him in a dress. Isn't that funny? He's going to parade around, and there's going to be a weird horned dog trying to hit on him. And I'm a little surprised that still made it into the remake, but I don't hate it. Point is, like, he was the butt of the joke. And as Michaela mentioned, now he's, like, in on it. Like, he's aware that he's a little goofy, and it's part of who he is, and it also is part of what endears him to everybody else in the group.
Yeah.
Like, it all makes a lot more sense now, and it makes me hopeful that, 10 years from now, when the third part's finished and we finally move on to some other remake, maybe like 6 could get the same treatment or something where like, let's take these characters that have a strong basis and make them even better.
Yeah, that would be cool.
And just as the last word on that, I know people have problems sometimes with the story of 7. No matter what, to me, it's worth it because we've gotten to now see what the original vision for this character was. And getting to see that fleshed out, it's already been worth it.
Yep.
There may be a similar glow up on the female side. We will see.
I already know where you're going, and I agree. And there could be a couple examples, potentially. So, yeah.
It's Yuffie. Number 7 is the other of the biggest glow ups that we had. There were 3 characters that I mentioned, even more so than Sora jumped. Last one was one of them, from honorable mention to number 8. And this one, Joel, was number 89 last time. I think this is a victim of timing, because Last of Us had just come out with the first game not long before we made this list. Keep in mind, by the way, as you think back on a decade, Grand Theft Auto 5 had just come out before we made this list. Like, Michael DeSanta got votes last time. He was like 52nd. So it's been a while. And a lot more people have had a chance to experience Last of Us, also the sequel and the TV show and all that jazz. So Joel goes from number 89 to number 7.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was getting to play the second one and seeing what a sad sack he is in that one. And living with what they did with his guilt and all of the different ways it manifests makes me like almost look back on the original differently and not as angry about it. Some people straight up defend it, and I think those people are crazy, killing all the doctors and shit. I think that's insane.
A little much.
But can you sort of see where he's coming from? Yeah, certainly. And I think having that journey where he loses his daughter and becomes completely cut off from the world until he meets Ellie, and then slowly starts to chip away at that until he becomes straight up fucking obsessed. The love of a parent drives everything that he does, and he feels too much, and that's his problem. It's great. I mean, it's great. Some of the best writing in video games is represented in Joel.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and seeing him like pretty much become a villain by the end of the first game, of where he completely obviously kills all those people, but also like doesn't even consider Ellie's thoughts or like what she would want in like the choice of her dying to save humanity, pretty much, and just being so selfish because he's already lost his biological daughter. He doesn't want to lose his now pretty much adoptive daughter. And yeah, his the stuff that happens in the second game with who he is and how he's grown even into that point to him dying it's just so cool.
And then there's this weird irony that the memory of him and his love is what like stops her from repeating this cycle of violence, even though he sacrificed everyone and everything for her. It's so complex, and that's what I love about him. Is he's such a complicated... I don't know if there's a more complicated character in gaming. I don't know.
Well, the thing I was going to say is, like, a lot of characters, if they're going to be any good, have to have flaws. The characters in Last of Us have capital F flaws.
Yes. Yeah.
The reason why this series has endeared itself to so many is because pretty much everybody who's a main character has some massive issues going on that cause them to come to loggerheads with each other and clash. But you can look at it from everyone's perspective and be like, oh, I see how this happened. Maybe I don't agree with it. Maybe I don't understand how it got this far, but I look at it and I go, okay, there's a roadmap for the different things that happened to this person that has made them the way they are now and may prevent them from making the right choice in the future. Joel's exemplary of that. So we can look at Cloud, we just had him at number 8. Like, what are his flaws? Well, he's closed off, he's pretending to be somebody he's not, blah, blah, blah. Joel has like massive trauma that he's dealing with that guide his decision making, sometimes in good ways, usually in less good ways. And yet he's still not a villain. Maisie's right. He sort of becomes one by the end of the first game, but like he didn't get any votes for our villain list.
Right.
Yeah.
He's just a deeply flawed protagonist style character. And since The Last of Us has basically 3.5 of those, it works really well.
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
So we have my vote as well. He wasn't super high on my list, but he was on my list because I think it deserves recognition.
Yeah.
Number 6 was number 5 last time. So hasn't budged much despite everything else shuffling all over the place.
Those are the most amazing to me. The ones that don't hardly move despite being 10 years.
Yeah, we haven't seen those in a
cool.
while. We saw a couple in the mid-teens area.
Yeah.
But now we get there's only 2 other characters who were in the previous top 25. One's in the top 5. And one of them is Garrus Vakarian.
Yeah, I mean, when you think of gaming's best companions, like he's what comes to mind every time. So you talk about like the journey, and he's like the angel of death at the beginning of the second one. He's already interesting from the first one because he wants to he's sick of all the yellow tape or the red tape, whatever color. All the tape, actually. He hates all tape. And that makes him already sort of interesting. He sort of embodies this like Jack Bauer sort of character where like he's sick of all of the policy. He just wants to get shit done. Really strong sense of justice. Takes it into his own hands even when he maybe shouldn't. But he's always got your fucking back. And he is present in all 3 games. Very prominent. great voice actor, so kind of like gives him a little bit of warmth that maybe isn't always necessarily even there in the writing of the character.
Yep.
He's just great. And by the end of it, you can spend time with certain characters. It was going to Garrus, and we spent time shooting discs in the Citadel, and I'll always remember that. Made such an impression.
Yeah, he was always going to be top of the list. I've done 2 different playthroughs of Mass Effect 2 and 3, and one of them I dated him, one I didn't, but either way, I was spending time with him. And how telling, because I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, like, as we get to the top of the list, all protagonists. And the last 7 or 8 picks, all protagonists. Yeah, there's, like, Riku blurs the line, but he is essentially the lead of a couple different games, or at least a deuteragonist, right? And then, Vivi or Orin are in their top 25. But for the most part, these are all main characters, and Garrus is very much not. And Commander Shepard was on our list earlier, lower than this. Why? I think it's because of the expectation. I think it's what Sean said. He's one of the best companion characters we've ever seen. There's a reason why even people who don't necessarily gravitate to characters they're not romancing still picked up with Garrus. Even male ship players are like, well, I'm just going to spend time blowing it up with Garrus. I don't give a damn. So he was number 5 last time, and I look back on that and I'm like, is that too high? He ended up at number 6 this time, so I guess the answer is no.
Yeah. And I think that's a testament to 5 votes. He got a pretty good spread and pretty high. And I think people relate to him. I think he's the type of character where he'll kind of be on your side regardless of Paragon or Renegade. So he kind of operates in the gray area himself, and I think he's great. One day you'll play these games, Kayla, and you'll find out for yourself. Just kidding, you never will.
I want to. No, I mean I've heard nothing but good things, and I really do need to.
Just don't spend too much
And
time
here
in
I
the Citadel, because that's where I quit.
Well, that's the
'cause I
advice
got
for anybody.
Right.
That's the worst part of the game.
Okay.
Or just
I think I can do
or
that.
just skip 1 entirely. That also helps. Because as much as I love 2 and 3, never played 1, haven't looked back. Well, I mean, I played 1 for 5 hours and it glitched out and crashed and then never went back.
Fair
So,
enough.
and yet I still love the trilogy, which is weird to say when you hate 1/3 of it. All right, into the top 5. The top 5 has 4 characters that didn't exist 10 years ago.
Okay.
And our number 1 from last time. So,
Okay.
it's weird company.
Mm-hmm.
It starts out with Zagreus.
Yes.
Sean's shirt.
Yeah.
All 4 of us voted for
It is
him.
his shirt.
Yeah. So
what a good character. Go ahead.
he's great. I mean, they took a new approach to the roguelike where all the iterations are part of the story, and it all works as well as it does because of how nuanced he is. You can talk about, we gave votes to other characters because of their belief in what they're doing. Zagreus certainly shares that, but just his rebellion or rebellious nature, the way he interacts with people, he seems to love them even though he's rebelling against them. There's just a lot going on. But I think it's so relatable, that the metaphor of rebelling against your parents and that whole thing. It works really well because he's one of the better written characters in all of gaming.
I love that as you start to do more runs, because at first you think he's just running away because his father's an asshole.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But the more time you do runs and you realize he's actually just trying to find his mom.
Yeah.
And you reunite the family, it's fucking beautiful. It's just such a relatable, surprisingly grounded and wholesome story and motivation that I was not expecting, and it just endeared me to him immediately. And I also just love his voice actor, who is also the composer of the game.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, Darren Korb. Yeah, he does the music, and he's his voice, and he's Skelly, and and just his choices where he's kind of like a smarmy little shit, but he cares so much. And they took an obscure god from Greek mythology. No one knows anything about Zagreus in the original mythology. He's very, very obscure. And the fact that they just created this really fleshed out, amazing character is just so incredible. I just love all the choices with him. He's so good.
To steal a bit of terminology from a generation that's younger than me now, he is brat without being bratty.
Mm-hmm.
And once you learn more about his reasoning for why he is being rebellious, as Sean mentioned, then you go, oh, okay, so it's not just this, teenage story of somebody trying to break free. He's probably right. And you can tell that not just because of what you learn about him and his circumstances, but also the way he treats everybody else, the way he is with Meg, the way he is with Thanatos. Like, you see a kindness to him that really shouldn't make sense for the son of Hades. Like, he probably should be more of an asshole. And the first run, you might think, like, oh, he's kind of a dick in his own right, but you come to find out that no, he's actually got a lot of depth to him. And then as you finally overcome your father and start to get into the post-game of sorts, you really get to see more of his humanity as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, he was not in my top 10. It was not as high for me as he was for some folks, but he was definitely about the middle part of my list. And seeing him here, I know the panel really likes Hades. I think I ended up, 9th in our best games list or something. So, like, I'm not surprised by the result. I didn't think he was going to be top 5, but I'm not upset with it.
Amazing.
Sorry, I was waiting for everybody to I was kind of thinking, like, for me, I don't know, I'm an emotional person, so him obviously, like, having that growth of doing every run and trying to find his mom, and when he finds it to the outside world and learns that he can't survive out there, and, like, his determination still to spend any moment he can with his mom and to, like, die every freaking time is was so heartbreaking to me. And that, like, was just the cherry on top of his kindness and his general personality of this game. He's just, like, such an amazing person.
That's actually a great point of, like, all he endures for 5 minutes on the outside.
Yeah.
It's very Sisyphusian, actually, which is funny because Sisyphus is in the game.
Yeah.
And the sense of humor, the save the cat moment, except to save the dog because he will not fight Cerberus. It's like, it's just, like, very well thought out character.
Yeah. Amazing.
This is the gap. There's a jump again. We had a jump when we went into the top 10. And the top 4, well, I guess there's only 4 points separating these, so I guess the jump has already happened. But this one's a tough one. This is the most votes anybody has gotten coming up for our number 4. The only person to have 9 votes.
So I think I know who this is then.
It's our number 1 from last time.
Yep.
It is Link.
So he dropped on my list. I think he was my number 1 vote last time. And I just went as a character, as an icon and a headliner of my favorite games of all time. He deserves some recognition. But again, when you're talking about all the people on this list, so many of the ones we're talking about now, well-written, flawed, so interesting. They embodied certain characteristics. It's like Link doesn't speak. He barely emotes, depending on the game. He is, by definition, a stand-in for the character. They're linked to this world. That took a hit for me this time.
He's my number 1 still. I think all the reasons you just said make sense. And I sat there looking at my list when I compiled, like, a rough order to it. Like, all right, so, you can quibble, move one up above another and whatnot. And I looked at everybody below him and I went, I don't think they're as worthy. Which is unusual because, again, self-insert in a lot of ways. However, over the course of the last 40 years, we've seen plenty of examples of Link exerting his own personality. Wind Waker comes to mind.
Yep.
It was also really high up on our best games ever list. I think number 3 in the most recent one, 10 years later. Plenty of personality in there and plenty of determination and plenty of doing what's right. Breath of the Wild also helped with this quite a bit. The moments he's got with Zelda in those games, I think, really reveal a different side of him than we had before. So it's a little bit weird. You can certainly talk about the icon side of things. Like, he's every bit the icon Mario is, but even though he doesn't have a robust character, it's certainly more fleshed out than Mario is. So I left him number 1. I'm the only person who didn't drop him. A lot of votes here are all in, like, there's a couple top 5s and there's a bunch of, like, 15-ish stuff. That's how he's accrued this many points to get this high. So I'm the outlier on it, but I don't mind that he's not our number 1. I kind of like that he isn't, even though he's my number 1.
Yeah, and I think all the things that you just said. So he dropped on my list, but not terribly far.
No.
And I think it's the same reason. There's going to be some characters on the female side, I know, that do this where, as written, is there a lot to them? No, but they're defined. Their characters defined by what they do, and the actions that they take, and the situations that they're in and have to overcome. And I think with Link, that is extremely the case. As the wielder of the Triforce of Courage and all of the shit he has to endure, using his brains and his brawn So there's a lot there. He's still very impressive. It's just why I think I had him as number 1 and he dropped because we're missing. I use different criteria this time. I am absolutely fine with him being top 10, a top 5 even. I think it's great.
Interesting that he's dropped, but not surprising.
Yeah.
And considering how far some people dropped, which again we'll get to at the end here, going from 1 to 4, not that bad.
Yeah. Michaela, what do you think?
I mean, I just agree with everything that you guys have said. I think he is just such an icon, and even if he doesn't speak, there is still some personality there and things that you can infer about him, even just from the way that other people talk about him, or other characters talk about him, and how he feels about his role and everything. So, I mean. And I don't know if the answer is to give him a speaking voice or anything. Like, I think I like that he is an icon who doesn't speak. Like, I don't know if he needs to. It would be great to have a little more like conflict within him. But I think with what we have, he really is an iconic character. And I like what we do see and the personality that he does have.
Well, and I think it's also fun too watching him across the different games. I think like Chris had kind of mentioned where like, Wind Waker, he's like this cutesy little goofy kiddo, running around. And then like Twilight Princess where it's like this dark motif and he's a wolf and like all of this just grungy, sorry, sort of thing, and so that almost kind of helps give him like differing personality or like areas to grow while still staying within the confines of who Link is.
Yeah.
But for me, especially like, his games were kind of like the very first games that Sean had me play back when. And so it's just like iconic and still very special.
He's at his best when he has other good characters to bounce off of. It's why like Skyward Sword stands out because of his interactions with Zelda in that game, or the couple I mentioned before.
Midna.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Twilight Princess. One of
Midna's a big
one of
one.
the things it does really well. So like, there's plenty of other situations where he's not just a blank slate, and I think that's why he's here. But he's not in our top 3. Our top 3 is made up of characters who all did not exist 10 years ago, so it wasn't even like a glow up. They just had not been born yet. We have not yet gotten to Sean's number 1. We have not yet gotten to Maisie's number 1.
Well, it's interesting because this character, who we're going to go over on the list, did exist, but also didn't exist. But we'll get there eventually.
This character?
Yep.
Woo!
Kratos,
Absolutely.
number 3.
So,
To
yeah.
me, he didn't exist, but you're
Right.
absolutely right that he did.
So because all we had was the first 3 games where he's a fucking edgelord, tryhard, anti-hero, defined by, I think his anger and killing people to solve puzzles. There were always puzzles in those games. You almost forget. There were always tons of puzzles, but you
Yeah.
always have to kill people, put them in the gears, take their body, put them in the gear, like stuff. It's
Oh
terrible.
my
Mhm.
god, I should play these
Sex
games.
mini games with quick time events.
Yep.
Lots of things that we don't look too kindly back on as part of the video game industry of the 2000s.
Yeah, but even then he had, I think some people would have had him on their list because there is that edge of tragedy. The reason he has so much rage, how he was betrayed, he has the ashes of his family on his skin, like just he's very emblematic of what was cool at the time, but also not very dimensional, I didn't think. So, the first 30 seconds of God of War it changes everything. And it's just him on a tree being sad that his wife is dead. And you're like, holy shit. So he's older, he's a bit wiser, he's a bit more sentimental, he's calmed down that rage, partially just because I think he's learned to love. Also, like, he kind of destroyed part of the world getting his revenge, and I think that can leave an impact on somebody. I'm not going to say he changed because of Pandora. I'm going to disregard kind of all of that because it was shoehorned in anyways. He really changed in 4, and obviously having a son now. And that dynamic between him and Atreus, it just made for one of the best games I've ever played and one of the best stories I've ever played. And to see that growth that is then cemented at the end of Ragnarok, it's incredible. No character in gaming has gone through such a journey. I think he was my number 1 or number 2. And given the day, I could have swapped it. I think I had, yeah. He was my number 1 at a time because just thinking what other character in gaming goes through such a journey. I think it's incredible.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I only played 4 and Ragnarok, but even obviously Sean kind of always gives me like background, especially on like these types of characters who are so different already at the start of a game that I'm playing. But even just watching him from 4 into Ragnarok and like struggling with like raising this weird kid who he doesn't know what the heck to do with, who's also going through his own obvious troubles and like struggling with that, and then into Ragnarok where he's so much more emotional and he's so much more caring and is like truly like a father and wants to build bridges with people who he formerly would have hated or had problems with, is just so kind, and like it's such a beautiful like transition, and like God, I cry so much in these games because of their growth.
They capture so much what it's like to being a dad, how difficult it is to shed who you used to be and change and keep having it thrown in your face like, no, this is who you are. And so if you looked at when God of War 3 came out and like, well, just wait, in however many years, this is going to be like the story of like what it means to be a dad. You'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to say, like, he could have been irredeemable.
Oh, yeah.
We could have looked back on the first trilogy, and yes, 3 makes a few strides, but we could have looked back on it and been like, yeah, there's no reason to bring that character back, especially now, 15 years later. Like, what would be the point? How does he fit into a modern landscape? To me, it's kind of, sort of, this is not a great analogy, but work with me here. It's kind of like Duke Nukem. Duke Nukem comes back, gets resurrected, and is basically hitting all the same beats.
Yep.
And it doesn't work. It falls flat. Even though some of that's kind of like intentionally on the nose and like an homage to back then, you're like, it just feels like the game's passed you by, man. So if you bring Kratos back, and he has not changed in the way that he did, probably a massive mistake. But to bring him not only just to be respectable, but like a fully fledged, very well done character, it's one of the more remarkable stories of gaming, in my opinion.
That's true.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And to say, what's the part that stands out to me in God of War 3? Oh, when you're doing a god battle and you're like on him because he's huge, and then you look at 4, the moment is you're in a raft and you've lost your son, and you're dealing with like, I have to accept this part of me that I have locked behind, and but I have to tap into it because this is where I need to save my son. It's just like, it's all character driven.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole thing is reflected by that change. And then the epilogue, Maisie hasn't even played. It's a roguelike epilogue that's very, very good. But it's like the cap to his entire story. And if we never get another God of War, which I think we probably will, it would be the perfect ending to one of the most remarkable journeys that we've ever seen.
And it is fun too, like in 4, I think he's kind of in between that, where he is in Ragnarok and back to 3. Because like, there is still a lot of like boat time where you're plugging along and Mimir's telling all these stories and Atreus is so excited, and you can hear like Kratos like, come on, like this isn't story time, this isn't what we should be doing, but then he like softens up, and it's very fun seeing that in between and growth.
I could talk for 30 minutes just of Kratos, so we'll end it there, but I'm very happy with this pick.
Yeah.
We're down to our top 2. Sean, you know what both of them are. Which would you think is number 1? I'm going to put you on the spot. Ooh. Your number 1 is still out there, but you know who both characters left are.
Not my number 1, I think my number 1, I think, is not going to be our number 1.
Okay. We also still have Dave's number 1.
Oh.
Carrie's number 1. Doug's number 1. Floating in the mix here. We just hit Maisie's number 1. That was Sean's number 2, Kratos. There's a small jump here, but there's a clear gap between number 1 and number 2, so it's not like it's like, oh, well, again, slightly different vote would have done this. Number 2 is Arthur Morgan from Red Dead 2.
Okay.
That is Dave's number 1 and Carrie's number 1.
Nice.
So I was wrong, but that's okay. Arthur Morgan took me by surprise because I did not even want to play Red Dead 2. I kind of felt like I had to because of all the recognition it got, but I didn't like really want to. I was fine leaving it at 1. I heard this was just like over simulates life in the like you'll make your own coffee, you carve your own bullets. Like sounds all like a waste of time. Arthur Morgan blew me away. Getting to see we talked so much about journeys, but like seeing where he is, and then the moment he contracts tuberculosis, you can almost see the blood go into his mouth from that moment, and then it's just downhill from there. I suppose you could play him as an asshole, but you're doing yourself a complete disservice, and I would argue not what the game really wants you to do. I think it wants you to play the redemption arc, and it works so well. I think it's one of the first times ever I cried in gaming, too, because of the horse. Scene with the horse. Very sad. And just seeing where he goes to somebody who's pretty self-centered, cares about the gang, but otherwise, not really, is going to do whatever needs to be done, too. Just like being completely selfless by the end because of the reality and his mortality that he's had to face. It's really incredible.
I'm a little surprised at this. And hear me out. I have him on my list, so to be very clear, I'm not upset with this outcome whatsoever. I'm glad he's not our number 1, and it's only because he's in one game.
Yeah.
And that one game is excellent. It would be some people's pick for the best game ever made. I'm not trying to take away from that. I almost wish it was flipped with him and Kratos. I wish he was number 3. If I was sitting here cherry picking how I might have liked the group list to come out.
Sure.
To flip flop those two, just because again, Kratos overcomes so much, and there's multiple games there with 2018 and Ragnarok. And obviously, we know Geralt's number 1 now because he wasn't number 2. So it's the same idea, where he's got a whole trilogy to work with, and now also the original books and the TV show and blah, blah, blah. So, it's not trying to detract from Arthur, but I'm glad he didn't make it to number 1, even though he's got a lot of votes and a lot of points, just because of that reason. Yep. I think it'd be weird if our number 1 character was in one game. As awesome, as excellent as that one game is, I think number 2 is a perfect spot for him.
Yep.
I never played these games, but I watched Sean play this game, and I just freaking love his voice. And just I'm just messing with you.
Yeah, you run people down in the street, you're like, calm down, I'm just playing with you. It's like that person's dead, Arthur.
Yeah. Every time I hear the word well in my head, it's well.
Yeah.
His version of well is what I hear when I read the word well.
It's so funny.
Some of the and the delivery. There's a moment when Dutch wants you to jump on a train, and you don't really like the plan, and then it gets even worse because the train you thought was gonna be going slow just whizzes by, and you're just like, still want us to just hop on, Dutch? It's so funny. I was like, that actor I think had a great time playing the character. I think he's very well written. I loved it.
Yeah.
I gave mine a long beard, the longest beard possible. I would not shave.
And you gotta have the oil and all that. Yeah.
There's no time for that. So there's no surprise in our number 1. I already said it, but we knew it was going to come down to one of these folks, and Geralt of Rivia ends up being number 1 by a comfortable 57 points, which is a lot in the new, more compact scales that we use. Because we had some characters get like 600 points last time, but there was like 200 for me and Sean and Dave for our number 1. Because it was a weird time back then. We've gotten better about it. So having a 57-point gap is pretty remarkable considering our number 25 only had 97 points total.
He's funny because I think it's an example, Chris, you mentioned this of like you do your list based on like you and you're not trying to game anything. I don't know if I would have wanted Geralt to be the number 1 on our overall list, even though he is number 1 on mine. But here we are. And I fucking love the guy. And the reason he's my number 1 is I love where he goes in 3. We talk so much about journeys and seeing throughout the trilogy the transformation he makes from someone who's supposed to be devoid of emotion and love, neutral from politics all the way down to emotions is what he's supposed to be, and seeing how much he grows and this adoptive father relationship with Cirilla changes him. And the moment where you think she's dead in 3, I think really solidified like, oh yeah, no, this is a man who feels completely.
Yeah.
You combine one of the best performances in gaming that I've ever seen, how smart he is, how many conflicts are solved just by him thinking through them, along with obviously being very adept at fighting. He's like an investigator. He's this warrior. he's so like wise beyond his years. It's really incredible. And then seeing where he comes from the first one, which is like kind of a weird representation because he has amnesia and all of that. But then his growth from there is really impressive. I also include the books, which is cheating a little bit, but these are sequels to the books. It's not a reimagining. It's full on sequel. So to see where he comes in the books and then where he ends up now really cements that journey. And it's amazing. It's one of my favorite experiences in gaming. It's one of the very few games that I've beaten and been like, I'm sad. I feel that very rarely with a game, and I felt it hardcore with this one.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you know, kind of combining it with, again, the father figure growth and everything, but the fact that ideally you, as a father figure, mentor Ciri, but also like let her make her own decisions, and like him coming to terms with like, all right, let her figure it out, you know, like trust her in what she's able to do, is just a really cool moment in this game. Like, it's just nice to see him step back. I don't know. I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
There's elements in all 3 games, but I feel like 3 deserves the lion's share of the credit here, which makes sense just given that it's a mid-2000s game and not... I mean, the first one's what, 07, 08, somewhere around there? Yeah. So, like, we just talked about a lot of other, like, flawed protagonists from that era, like a Master Chief, a Marcus Phoenix, a Kratos back then. Like, a lot of these characters that were just supposed to be, like, tough and cool and whatever. He sort of gets to sidestep that, and he ends up still being tough and cool and smart and all those things. Kind of like a feudal Batman of sorts. Like, it just... I don't know. It works, and I have no qualms at it. Number 1. This is your number 1. This is Doug's number 1. There's a 5th, a 6th, a 7th, and a couple other votes in there on my list. I don't know. I was surprised it was this wide a margin, but I wasn't surprised that he was number 1.
Yeah. It's just amazing. And again, thinking of like going back to the game and wanting to 100% it just because I didn't want to miss like a single line of dialogue because it's all so fascinating. And some of my favorite moments being like figuring out, do you remember that there's like a troll and you have to figure out how to break the curse, and it has to do with like the spoon and the soup?
Yeah, that one's so cool.
And you can choose, there's a little bit of self-insert on these, but you're still Geralt of Rivia, you're still doing all that. But like you can choose to kill the troll, but if you stick with it, you like figure out how to break the curse, and you're just like, this is why I love this guy.
Yeah.
It's like he's so smart, and he's so much above all of your other witchers,
monster killers.
In the series.
Yeah, he's so smart that he like can assess the situation and can see, okay, maybe this actually is not a monster that I should just be cutting its head off. Let me like investigate a little bit more and find out if there's like more to this story. And that's where you end up like actually saving people instead of just chopping down trees.
And you stay mostly neutral throughout the game still. Like you could go like assassinate like all the kings, and like, if that was this game, but it's not. It's a different type of story that's being told. And because it's someone who recognizes the world is not just black and white. So like I go kill a king, another one pops up, like it's not my fight. And you play it for the quests where you're just drunk with the other witchers. There's no combat. It's very much, Chris, like Cyberpunk does this with the funeral mission and things like that. Like you just get to exist as the character, and that's confidence in the character, and it's because they're so well written.
Yeah, he's so cool.
And that's our list. How do you think it went?
I mean, I'm pretty. This list, we're done with it, and I'm like, that's a strong list. And I did not feel that way about our last list. I was like, well, that's a weird list. There's some good, it holds up. Link being number 1 last time, I was fine with, but there's some weird choices on that list, and I'm much happier with this one. I
mentioned 10 people fell off completely. Only 15 fell off in total. Only 10 made it back from last time. Excuse me, my voice is gone. I talked a lot yesterday. All the top 8 made it back. That's Link was number 1, Phoenix Wright number 2, Riku number 3, Zidane number 4. Where's 5?
That's too high.
Joel, no, not Joel. Garrus number 5. Joel was way lower. John Marston number 6, Shepard number 7, Yuri Lowell number 8. Those all made it back in. And then our number 14 and 15 made it in, and that's it. Everything else from last time was purged from existence.
What's the highest one that
Dang.
didn't make it back?
Number 9 was the highest one. I got to switch screens for that. Hold
Oh,
on.
nice. Okay.
Number 9 on the male list was, I remember this, but it's not clicking. Number 9 was Lee Everett. I'm the only person who voted from Lee from The Walking Dead, which I find to be a mistake. But he would have needed more than my vote to crack the top 25 anyways, so I can't be too mad about, like, I can't believe nobody else voted for him. Like, I think that's a little bit too precipitous of a fall. He probably should have been like the 30s or 40s, but that's
Yeah.
okay.
No, I was struggling to find a spot for him. I think that one, even though I disagree with it, it comes down to that style of game is just,
Yeah.
man, talk about a change from last time we did this.
Well, and that's also reflected in our number 13, the first on our list that didn't get any votes, which was Big B Wolf.
yeah. Yeah.
Same idea. Like, Telltale was all the rage 10 years ago, and it was just about to start falling off, and we didn't know it yet. And if you want to look at the recency bias of our previous list, that's the worst one on it.
And it makes me sad because Lee and Bigby, I love them both.
Good characters, for
Yeah.
sure. But they've probably been over-punished. So maybe 10 years from now, we circle back and we go, okay, like,
Yeah.
those games fell off quick, but those were two good characters. I mean, we'll see. 10 years from now, we'll also have another decade worth of competitors trying to elbow their way into the list.
Yep.
Also from last time, Yoshi was number 17.
That's
no
good
votes.
that he's off.
Red from Pokemon was number 18. No votes. Ganondorf was number 19. No votes, but high on the villains list.
Yeah.
Same with number 20, Kefka. No votes, high on the villains list. So that's part of it. Chrono was 21. Did get votes this time, but wasn't anywhere close. Alistair from Dragon Age was number 22. I don't think that's an omission now, him being...
That one's
Mike
confusing.
Hager is 23. That's partially on me. All right, I'll put that one on me. He is the mayor of Earth, but did not need to be in the top 25. Miles Edgeworth, no votes this time. Not because he's a bad character, but I just think he got crowded out, and we wanted to scale back Phoenix Wright a little bit. So, like, a lot of folks nowhere to be found, not even just out of the top 25, but no votes, which is just a testament to how far gaming's come.
Yeah, and with Miles, I can't remember where he was on my villains list. And villain is a little strong, but he is an antagonist, and
Sure.
so that's what happened there. So when you combine how far we came since last time in gaming, how far we've come, and also the villain list that we had, and the different criteria, like the things that are how we define a good character, we arrived at this list, and I think it was better.
I think it's for the best. It would be interesting to see how they would have done if we hadn't done villains. It would be exactly apples to apples then. But, like, I don't know where I would put Kefka on my list with these other characters that we put on here. It'd be somewhere decently high, but having them as the villains allowed me to put them in a much higher position. So I think it's for the better. And again, 10 years from now, we'll take a step back and see, are we all still alive? And if so, how do we vote?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
Asking the important questions.
Maybe Dave will be able to make time next time.
No.
You think 10 years from now he can make time to be on the...
At least one of his kids should be in college by then. So
He'll
maybe.
need to go to class with them, so no, he won't have time.
Oh,
he'll
that's
be
true.
chaperone.
That's true. There might be an ASU game on.
Yeah. In theory, colleges will still exist in 10 years, right? It's too quick for that system to collapse. It's going to collapse, but
Yeah.
that'd be pretty fast. All right, next week we will continue by starting on the female side. We'll be going from 25 to 11 there. The week after that, 10 to 1. And then we'll kind of take a look back at the whole thing and just see how we felt like we did. I think both lists turned out pretty well. I've seen the results, but none of these folks know what's happening, and neither do you, dear listeners. So join us next week. I know it's Christmas Eve, but you can always watch it later if you're busy. I get it. That's the end of this episode. In between shows, you can come to our website, grayareas.live, or youtube.com/@grayareaslive. We'll see you next time.